So growing up just a couple of hours from Cincinnati, Ohio, obviously I've always been a big fan of the Cincinnati Reds. Most people up here are. And today I'm actually in Cincinnati, in and around some of the suburbs, and we are going to do a tour today of the famous graves of some Cincinnati Reds and Cincinnati Reds related legends. I hope you enjoy. Please find me on Facebook, Instagram by searching Whit Docs. Please click that subscribe button. Let's take a look at some famous Cincinnati Reds graves today. I'm starting my journey in Hamilton, Ohio today, which is just, I guess, a little bit north of Cincinnati, about 30 minutes away, and I'm actually on the way to visit the grave of one of the most beloved figures in Cincinnati Reds baseball of all time. I'm talking about Joe Nuxhall. Now, Joe was the youngest player to ever pitch in a major league game, but he really became famous when he became the announcer for the Cincinnati Reds, and him along with Marty Brennaman, I mean, it was just a soundtrack of my childhood. I would, lay in bed, listen to the games, listen to Marty and Joe call them. So it's an honor to visit the grave of Joe Nuxhall today. And comment below, were you a Reds fan? And I know I've got viewers from everywhere. Who was your favorite team? Did you like baseball? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So let's visit the grave of Joe Nuxhall. Coming up upon the grave of Joe Nuxhall, Joe was buried in a mausoleum here in Hamilton, Ohio. And every night almost I would listen to him and Marty Brennaman call the games. It was a soundtrack of my childhood, and it's an honor to pay my respects to Joe today. I would lay in bed and listen, and he made no bones about who his team was. Whenever the Reds would do something good, his excitement, it could be felt through the radio. Not only was he the youngest player to ever play the game, I believe he was 15 years old when he got his first call as a pitcher. But when he became the announcer for the Cincinnati Reds, one of them, he just really made his home in the broadcast booth. So Joe Nuxhall, former pitcher and announcer for the Cincinnati Reds. We've made it to the Gate of Heaven Cemetery here in Cincinnati, visiting the grave of controversial Reds owner Marge Schott. Marge was the owner of the Cincinnati Reds during the 1990 World Series championship team, and eventually was forced out due to just several instances of controversial comments that she had made over the years, but a part of Reds history nonetheless. Marge Schott, like I said, was the owner of the Reds during the 1990 World Series team, which was actually the last World Series team Cincinnati has had. Marge Schott was at nearly all of the Cincinnati Reds games, normally with her St. Bernards. One was named Schottsy, and then there was a Schottsy too, I believe. But yeah, a very hands-on owner. Had her own seat at the game, and it was down towards the field. It wasn't up in an owner's box or anything like that. She normally watched the game from the field, but this is the grave of Marge. We are currently standing at the grave of Gus Bell, and the whole Bell family, really. Gus, his son Buddy, and even his grandson now is the current manager of the Cincinnati Reds. So there's a big history there, lineage of association with the Cincinnati Reds. Gus Bell played for several years with the Reds, and like I said, his grandson is actually the current manager at the time of this recording of the Reds. I'm here at the mausoleum to pay my respects to Reds legend Ted Kluszewski, and if there was ever anyone back in his day that the kids wanted to emulate, it was Ted. He would cut the sleeves out of his jersey because his arms were so big, and just really, I mean, it's who everybody wanted to be, was Ted Kluszewski, and just a larger-than-life personality. And if there was anyone that you wanted to emulate and be like on the baseball field, it was Ted Kluszewski. Ted Kluszewski is buried in an outside mausoleum, and Ted, he passed away in 1988, but his playing days were several years before that, obviously. But like I said, I mean, he would cut the sleeves out of his jersey and let his arms show, and he was pretty ripped, for a baseball player. He was definitely ripped, and if there's anyone that you wanted to emulate and be like, it was Ted Kluszewski. In continuing my tour of the famous graves related to the Cincinnati Reds here in Cincinnati, Ohio, we are actually walking up to the gravesite of Powell Crosley Jr. Now, you Reds fans will be very familiar with that name. If you are not, Powell Crosley was a noted businessman in Cincinnati and eventually became the majority owner of the Cincinnati Reds. You know, Powell Crosley, in addition to being the owner of the Cincinnati Reds, actually was an innovator of his day. Some of his inventions even actually led to the creation of 700 WLW, one of the really one of the biggest AM stations in the U.S., based out of Cincinnati. And long before there was Great American Ballpark, Riverfront Stadium, there was Crosley Field, named after Powell Crosley, the owner of the Cincinnati Reds. We are standing at the grave of Waite Hoyt. Now, Waite did play baseball for several years, was even inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1969 by the Veterans Committee. Now, Waite didn't play for the Reds, but he got his Reds notoriety by being a broadcaster. He was the broadcasted the games for several years. Now, Frank Bancroft is probably not a name that you associate with the Cincinnati Reds or someone you've ever even heard of. Let me explain his significance. Now, Frank Bancroft was at one time a very short-lived manager for the Cincinnati Reds, but he worked in the front office for many, many years and helped establish the opening day celebration and festivities. Now, the reason he is so important, if you know anything about opening day in Cincinnati, it is a holiday up here. I mean, there's a parade, there's festivities. It is something that people count down and look forward to all year. Even if you're not a baseball fan, you still take part in the activities. So Frank Bancroft is actually known as the father of opening day. Alfred Goshorn was the first president of the Cincinnati Baseball Club. It was started out as an amateur club, and they began touring towns and boldly proclaimed that they were no longer an amateur club, that everyone was all salary. They became the Cincinnati Red Stockings, which was the predecessor to the Cincinnati Reds. So this was actually, in a roundabout way, the first president of the club. And I'm going to wrap up my little tour of the Cincinnati Reds' famous graves here at Mr. Goshorn's grave. I think it's fitting the first president of the club, well, basically the first president of the club, stop at his grave. And I know there are more notable Cincinnati Reds graves here. If I had all the time in the world, I would love to make it to every one of them today. And unfortunately, all the time in the world is something that I do not have today. So I hope you did enjoy the visit. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. Who's your favorite team? Let's hear that. Who's your favorite team? Also, Facebook. Check me out, Whit Docs on Facebook. Check me out, Whit Docs on Instagram. If you enjoy this type of content, please click that subscribe button. I would love to have you join me on my future journeys. Have a great day. Thank you.